How's it going? You alright? It's been quite a week. London went back into lockdown last Wednesday. So this whole week has been interesting because it's been cold outside but warm inside. And then it got warm outside. And then I went outside and it was like, oh, but there's nowhere to go. Anyway, hello. Welcome to this week's Instagram live chat with a dear, talented buddy friend of mine from across the world. This week's is pretty awesome. I get to talk to an old friend of mine, sometime colleague, and I wouldn't call us business partners, but we kind of do a bunch of work together as well. But yeah, it's Nikhil Chinapa, the original sort of 90s to noughties Indian MTV heartthrob. This guy makes my heart throb, amongst other things as well. Let me try and find him and invite him to this chat. There we go. Will he accept is the option. Is the option, is the key, is the question. Option, question. Crikey, I've had a couple of these already, as you can probably tell. Hopefully his internet isn't like pads, because it just says connecting and connecting and connecting. Oh. Anyway, while we're waiting for Nikhil to join us, how's everyone doing? How are you? Are you all right? You feeling okay? Things in your life well, I hope. Are, hi.
Trying to get the bloody internet to work over here, man. It's just... This is one of the problems with the lockdown. You know, everybody's gone like full onto Netflix.
Full online.
Right now, my Wi-Fi. Okay.
Yep.
My Wi-Fi is streaming at the magnificent speed of 1.6 Mbps.
Lovely. Are you sharing that with your whole building? Are you trying to sort of watch everything that you can? Have you got 25 screens at the moment on in your house with various people watching various things?
No, this is just it's just the state of the internet in Bombay, I think. I don't know whether it's across India. So right now, I just switched to my phone network.
Oh, wow.
And maybe it is.
And just as you said, you switched to your phone's network, it froze and then it just sped up. Let me just check that I'm not trying to download the whole world at the same time. Now we've mentioned that. Yeah.
So I have to.
This is so funny, right? So it's a perennial thing. Every time I talk to my sort of brown South Asian friends, I'm like, man, we're meant to be IT experts, and yet everyone's connection's fucked.
Just horrible.
Horrible. How have you been,
okay,
dude?
Everybody's trying to understand what. So I have to make a few things clear. Hold on a second. Let me just make this light a little bit brighter.
A few things clear. I mean, we're never going to actually get to the meat of this chat. But yes, hello, everybody. I'm glad Nikhil's here.
Hello, everybody. So here's the thing. Nerm's fans have to try and figure out who I am. And people who follow me on Instagram need to try and figure out who you are. So I'll go first. One of the reasons I'm wearing glasses is because I have a thyroid condition and it makes my eyes puffy. So for people who aren't used to seeing me on television or on Instagram, you're trying to figure out why I'm wearing dark glasses at 11:30 in the night in India. That's why. For Roadies fans, MTV fans, VH1 Supersonic fans who may not have heard of Nerm, if you're Supersonic, you've heard of Nerm for sure. But Nerm is arguably one of the most badass drum and bass DJs that I have heard in my life. What makes him so badass is not just that he's very gifted and talented as a musician, but he also plays blindingly well when he's drunk. That's what makes him special. And when he's drunk, he's also a lot more fun. Conversationally, physically, falling over consoles. Although, I don't think you've ever done that. I've done that.
Oh, no, dude. There was that MTV Emmys party where I smashed my head against the DJ console and fell off and then jumped back up and there was blood gushing out my head.
Was that an MTV show?
It was an MTV Emmys after party where there was a tank. Do you remember that? And I came on and played like 10 minutes of blistering beer. Yeah, anyway, yeah.
There were different rooms, right? I think I was in a different room at that point in time. There were multiple rooms.
I think so. But this is the thing. I was thinking back to how our paths crossed, right? So the first tour that we did with Shiva Sound System back in, I think, 2001, you were kind of like the sort of star of MTV at that point. And we came to do, I think, a tour. We did a couple of shows with MTV. No, it was 2002, and it was Just Grind at Mykonos in Bombay.
Oh, yeah. That was that was a club that was a little bit ahead of its time. I think it was just way too. But you guys packed it in and you smashed it that night. It was just like, whoa, who are these people and where have they come from? It was like a really, really good night.
It was amazing, and I think that was the thing, is that I think initially when we first met, we were kind of natural, not enemies, but we were on opposing sides of the musical spectrum.
Yes.
Because you were a proponent of house music, which you've continued to be, and I was like drum and bass is the way forward. And I think we kind of locked horns a little bit, and we were just like, yeah, fuck you, you're like, fuck you, fuck you. And then after that, we just became really, really, really good mates across the whole board.
After that, we've ended up doing a bunch of things together, including DH on Supersonic and Yam's house stage. But I do remember that Mykonos night, there was, you know how MTV would cordon off an area and there would be like, you know, the crew area or, you know, backstage or whatever you want to call it. And there's one girl who really wanted to try and get your attention and you would have none of it. She was trying and trying and trying the whole night. And you're just like, the same fuck you attitude that you were giving me, you were giving her. I'm like, but it's understandable why you're doing it to me, but
I think I was busy DJing at that point in time, and I take that stuff very seriously.
No, this was the afters.
Really?
I think you were just. I do remember this. You were so charged up because it had been such a brilliant night, and you were still bouncing off the walls. It was like there were lots of good vibes in the room that night. There were, like,
and I think I was also like 21, 22, so I was like young dickhead modes. And you know what it's like? I mean, this is 20 years ago essentially, and you've got that youthful exuberance that is just out there. So it can translate as kind of rudeness. So I've kind of learnt my lesson.
No, you were definitely rude that night. You.
I'd like to think I've grown and expanded a little bit over the years.
No, you were not being artistic. You were not being, autistic in any way.
Thank you. Either or. It was just straight out rudeness. Shit. Well, I apologize to whoever that person was. Shit, I'm really sorry. But also going back, right? So when we crossed paths.
Oh, by the way, I do remember the person's name. I'm just not mentioning it now.
Let's not mention it. You can tell me afterwards. You can tell me afterwards. You bastard. I told you. I thought, okay, right. I thought we'd keep this. Okay, fine. Cheers for that. I'm going to actually get that tip off you and then send an apology over. But yes, I apologize if I've ever been a bastard to you in person in the past. I apologize. But no, so going back to your career, this is the interesting thing, right? So the whole thing, the MTV in India astounds me because it was kind of responsible for a youth culture boom. You know, like over, you know, in the West, everyone says that youth culture kind of began in the 60s. There was lots of a more liberal application of money and sort of sexual liberation and just freedoms that kids had. And MTV in India was kind of the arrowhead of that in India. Do you agree or not?
Yes, but you know what the arrow was? MTV definitely was the arrowhead, but the arrow was just the advent of cable television in India. In the late 90s, when cable first came in, it was like the cool pair of sneakers that not everybody had. So people who had cable enjoyed it. People who didn't have cable tried to steal it. And in India, of course, you know, you can steal everything from water to electricity. So, you know, the cables were being cut and rejoined, and they were kind of pulled into your house from somebody from the neighbor's house, and you know, things like that were going on because it was very much a decentralized operation at that point in time. Individual areas or different localities would have entrepreneurs that would set up cable businesses, and they would set up like 4 or 5 dishes on their roof, and they would physically route cable to their neighbors' places. And if you didn't have cable, or if your mom and dad said you can't have it, you would attempt to steal it. So it became this really cool sort of bit of contraband that not everybody was allowed to have.
Right.
And the arrowhead of that was MTV because it had this kind of coolness to it. It was youth culture. It was cutting edge. It had these guys that, you know, guys and girls that spoke and presented music, and there were videos from all across the world.
Yeah.
So it was very much the thing that people gravitated towards. But MTV on its own wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for the cable revolution, if you know what I mean?
Right. I think
and the fact that cable wasn't freely available to everyone.
I think the other thing, it's interesting because I remember going to India when I was a kid for family and for yatras and all that kind of stuff, cultural purposes, before I came for music. And like seeing brands from the West alone was a big deal. You know what I mean? Like even getting hold of certain brands was a big deal. So having media pumped in at your disposal must have been completely revolutionary.
It was For us, it was just par for the course. I don't think too many of us thought too deeply about it, and that kind of goes for how the Indian music scene develops as well, because it's just a bunch of people having fun, doing cool stuff, and it just snowballed into a movement. It snowballed into counterculture, youth culture, whatever you want to call it. Because the kind of the illicitness of cable television at that point. I'm not talking about Mumbai, Delhi, Bangalore, Hyderabad. I'm talking about the B and C towns of India. Where it really started to take hold. This entire sort of feeling of wanting to do something different that your parents had not done, trying to copy what a presenter or a band in a music video was wearing on television, and trying to ape those moves in front of the camera when your parents weren't in front of a mirror when your parents weren't at home. That was very much the in thing. So, but I'm talking about how cable television at that point in time was almost illicit. It was almost contraband. I'm not talking about the metros. I'm talking about the heartland of India, which is where MTV actually took...
across the whole country, basically.
Yes.
That's quite mad. And then I'm guessing, when did MTV start? Like 92, 94?
No, 96.
96.
I joined in 97.
And then that means... Oh, really? I thought you were 99 for some reason. Or like
no,
98. Huh. Well, that's crazy. Because I was like, you were one of like you still are one of these people that you associate directly with MTV.
That's because I've been so lazy, I haven't gone anywhere now.
Everybody how did that happen in the first
wonderful
place?
things in their lives. They've gone to be actors and television stars, and they set up production houses, and they become enormously wealthy. And here I am sitting in my living room talking to one
doing
of my
the same fucking thing.
A glass of something unmentionable, and I've just been lazy, man. 23 years with MTV. It's a youth music channel, mind you, and I've been with them for 23 years.
But that's okay. So apart from your laziness and apart from your general sort of lack of ambition in leaving the comfortable job you have, like what is that golden factor? Because I tell you what, when I was on Radio 1 for years, which is a big radio station in the UK that's all about youth culture, I definitely aged out. You know what I mean? It's like one of those things where it's time to move on and let the younger generations through. But you initially got on to MTV by being like a contestant, because every single like presenter was found through a talent hunt, right? Back in those days.
So the talent hunt that I took part in was the first talent hunt that MTV had ever globally, and different regions then sort of copied the India model.
Right.
And I don't know, man. I don't know why I stuck around. I think over the years I accidentally reinvented myself a few times. So the show that I started doing on the 27th of September 1997 was MTV Selects, which for people who watched MTV in the 90s and early 2000s was a very simple dial-in request show. I stood in front of a green screen, and I had sort of images or photographs of music videos that scrolled over here on one side. And I would talk to a caller and say, hey, where are you calling from? What do you do? Which class are you in? What's your favorite subject? And they would request for a song, and I'd play it for them. And I did this Monday to Friday, 5 days a week for 11 years straight.
That's kind of like, that's a serious job. Was that live broadcast or just
no?
pre-recorded?
It was live to tape. Everybody thought it was live, and that's one of the sort of big. It's like how radio, you don't really know what's going on. You create this aura and this magic. So
you can do it. You can do it live, but you can record it as live, as if it was live, basically.
No, back then we weren't broadcasting from India. The transmission center was Singapore. So you would have to physically, and by the way, nothing was digital. It was all physical tapes. So physical tapes would get shipped to Singapore. They would get ingested into a system, and then they would get beamed up the satellite. So we used to record every Monday for the following Monday to Friday. So on one day, we would record 5 episodes.
Right.
So I'd shoot an episode, like chat with 5-10 callers, go into the green room, change my t-shirt, have a cup of tea or coffee, or change my jeans, and then come back out, and it was a new episode.
Wow.
So we do that 5 times a day, once a week.
So that was like one day's work to just smash out all the episodes for the week after.
Yeah. And the other days, we did other stuff on MTV. There were loads of different shows, because back then we were still presenting music. So there were like lots of shows that we were doing. There was a traveling show that we did called MTV Chill Out, where we'd go to a destination, we'd knock out like 15, 16 episodes in 3 days. And it was a lot of fun. But that's essentially what I did. And so then as MTV Select evolved, then the flagship show of MTV, which is still popular today, is a show called Roadies.
Yeah.
And I started on Roadies as a judge that picked the contestants, because one year MTV ran a little short on budget, and they had celebrities pick the contestants. They didn't have enough money for 2 celebrities, so they got 1 celebrity and they got me. Because I was like, I was part of the staff.
This is it. This is it. This is how you've had to do a long
don't have
career.
money, so
It's
let's
like,
get
fuck
Nikhil.
it, we'll just get Nikhil in. We haven't got any money, just get Nikhil in. It's fine.
And then when I did that, I realized that I couldn't do MTV Select on the show Roadies, which is a lot more in your face and aggressive and sort of more visceral in a way.
Right.
So I went off from my avatar of being the, hey, what's up? So you're on the 7th Standard. Who do you have a crush on? That personality on MTV Select. And I sort of did a Simon Cowell.
You became the
Roadies as
bastard,
a judge.
basically.
Sorry?
You became the bastard, basically.
Yeah, kind of. And
see, actually knowing you,
I
actually know
didn't
both
really...
sides of you personally. I know the nice gentleman
exactly.
side and the bastard side.
I wasn't putting it on.
Yeah,
it was all real. So when I looked at somebody on Roadies and I called them a fuckface, it's because I thought they were a fuckface. It wasn't just me putting it on. It's because I thought that they were low life scum. So I would say to them on the face.
Wow. But listen, dude, when did that production moved from Singapore to India during Roadies?
Sorry?
So the office went from Singapore to India during Roadies, is what you're saying?
Yeah. At some point in time, MTV Singapore was like the hub for MTV Asia. And then MTV Singapore launched its own MTV. And then MTV Thailand came along, Philippines, Malaysia. And they sort of decentralized everything. And then I guess they started to allow people to upload shows from India as well. You know,
because I remember the one thing that I remember of the whole scene in Bombay. So when I first went on tour, the very first time, I think when we met, in fact, I want to say the first time we met was before the MTV gig we did. So I think it was in 2001. But anyway, I think before that, the big sort of change in Bombay that I saw seemed to resonate out of the MTV office. Like everyone that worked in that MTV office was cool as fuck. Like, and they all went on to do other stuff.
Man,
you know, so that office was amazing.
Which was open plan, was just, it was amazing.
Yeah.
There wasn't enough place to put everybody there because of stuff, because the crew was growing like literally every month. And, but at that point in time, everybody knew everybody by first name. The whole office knew each other. And then by the time, you know, we moved to our second and our third office, every time I'd go there, I didn't know whether the person that I was looking at was an intern, had been there for 5 years, or was just visiting, you know, dropping sandwiches off for a friend.
Yeah,
the organization had just grown so large. But those early days, everybody knew everybody and everybody kicked ass. You know, whether it was marketing, production, on-air promos, like some of the promos that MTV did back then, like guys in India will remember this.
Oh, Karthik did those, didn't he?
If they're that old.
No, Karthik did those. Karthik did those, didn't he?
Karthik did those, yeah, but Karthik had a boss called Cyrus Oshidar. Oshi was very sort of decentralized in the way he worked. He empowered people to do their own shit. And he was just like really rude and sarcastic with everybody. So they kind of pushed everybody to just work a little harder.
Amazing.
And a lot of good shit happened.
I mean, that's the thing. Everyone from that office went on to do cool shit. Like everyone. It was amazing. And I think that was, it was a little bit, it reminded me of like when Time Out first started in India as well. The office of Time Out Bombay just exploded into a whole load of, you know, everyone from it is an editor of some big publication now. And it was interesting. So like, I think that actually, I think I've mistaken because I think I did meet you on the first tour in 2001 because after that is when I met Anusha and Ranvijay the year after, talking about roadies and stuff. So that's when Ranvijay and I became buddies after that whole first year when he was a contestant on that year. Yeah,
he was on the first show, on the first season. The first season was just like a travel show with people. Remember MTV Road Rules? Do you ever watch MTV Road Rules out of America?
No.
It was just like a show where a bunch of people got into a caravan and they kind of drove across America. So Roadies started off as that. And then they slowly started...
But on bikes, right?
Yes, on bikes.
Because I remember hearing that
with low budget,
in the office.
We can't do caravans. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Did you see the roads in India back then?
And there's the big two-wheel culture as well, so it made sense, right?
Yeah. And then the competitions and the vote outs and the sort of survivor-ish elements came into Roadies and just took on a life of its own after that.
That's nuts. And then how did that... Okay, so I remember then you set up Submerge. And I remember that even though we locked horns in terms of our love of different musical genres, you very graciously brought us in. You know what I mean? So we played with Submerge like in Bangalore when the first restrictions happened and everything had to close early. And
I remember like us
Yeah.
going on, and like the submerged message boards online was just amazing. Seeing those early communities sort of
Dude, the
explode.
forum. No, a lot of people don't know this, and I keep trying to tell the story over and over again. So, firstly, Submerge was set up as a collective because we wanted to just play music that we loved and that wasn't necessarily popular and wasn't top of the charts and it wasn't, you know, Mambo Number 5, which was everywhere, and Kaliyon Ka Chaman, which is another song that was like, you know, did my head in. And Pearl and I had been to Ibiza in 2001, and we loved the vibe there. We said, you know, we should try and. Pearl absentmindedly said that on the beach when she was playing with a boy, and she said, yeah, we should try and bring this back to India. And I was like, yeah, okay, whatever. And then Bacardi got in touch with us to try and bring some DJs across from Europe to do their Bacardi Blast events. Mm-hmm. And Pearl, at that point in time, was flying with KLM. She was in Amsterdam, you know, 3-4 times a month. So I said, Pearl, do you know any DJs in Amsterdam? She was like, yeah, sure. No, I know lots of DJs because she was going to clubbing. She was buying records in Amsterdam and she was bringing them back to India to play music. So she started booking DJs out of Amsterdam to come to India even before Submerge started. So the first DJ contracts for India, the first 2 pages were all sort of written up by her. And then when we started Submerge, it kind of became into this sort of loose collective where we did different things.
Yeah.
And when we started the forum, it became sort of like a place where people handheld each other through different genres of music. It wasn't a very bitchy kind of forum. It was actually very well behaved and people were nice. And when we started,
it felt like you were hand holding almost. It was like a sort of collective therapy group about discovering new music and how to get over it. It was
dancemusicgrouphugs.com is what we should have called it.
Yeah.
But the Submerge forum was amazing. And when I started to work with Sunburn, when we built Sunburn that first year, and we started doing, remember you'd come and played at Zanzibar before that?
Yes.
In Goa.
Yes.
Which was
speaking of which, I just want to shout out Arjun Wagler has jumped on. Speaking about the second ever Sunburn when Jalebi Cartel played and we played. But yeah.
Yes.
But yeah, Zanzibar.
So,
yeah. I've got a story about Zanzibar.
Zanzibar was the blueprint for Sunburn.
Yeah.
So Submerge was doing these parties at Zanzibar,
obviously.
and it started off by accident because Pearl and I loved the idea of playing music out at the beach. So we said, hey, Mark's got this shack called Zanzibar. Let's play some music out at the beach. So we started bringing our records and we started playing music and a crowd started to gather. And then at the end of the year, there were lots of people there. So we said, hey, Navid's in Goa, who's in Goa? And we just started programming DJs. And every year, it just became bigger and bigger. And then when we started Sunburn, we had the Submerge forum that would land up at Zanzibar every year, like an annual pilgrimage.
Yeah.
And on the 30th, we'd do something called the Submerge Annual, where just like different DJs would play. We'd play at Tito's. And we'd just be this massive blowout where we'd finish at 5 or 6 in the morning.
I've got a story about that too. Dude, so and then, there's this one story. Oh, go on, please continue.
Well,
I'll interject my story after.
So when we started Sunburn, nobody across India knew about Sunburn. The forum members, and there were 144 of them that were on the forum every single day. I still remember the number. It was 144. Those guys literally became evangelists for music festivals in India. They went out and they told their friends, they spoke about dance music, they spoke about Submerge. They told everybody, you've got to come to Goa. There's a new festival coming up. They were the ones that drove the interest in Sunburn. Otherwise, Sunburn would have just been sort of a name and a party in Goa. And I'll tell you this, the reason I know that they were the ones that drove it was because that first year of Sunburn, we made Sunburn popular all across India. But the shack that was 200 meters down the beach from where Sunburn was happening didn't know there was a music festival happening 200 meters from where they were. So if it wasn't for those forum members, I don't think we would have had the festival culture that we have today in India because those guys were the early evangelists and the pioneers of the scene.
But that's the thing. During the dots, I mean, credit to them because it was all about building a community rather than just lording it over everyone else and saying, I got there first. It's about building that community. And you did that amazingly well. But I think during the dot between sort of, you know, Pearl's initial thing of creating that sort of Ibithan vibe in Goa was interesting because I think also, you know, I've got to credit Jitin here, who was looking after us at Shiva Sound System at the time. Because again, we had this whole house versus drum and bass battle. And I remember, and it was always just like, no, if you're playing, you have to play house. Like, fuck you, we're playing drum and bass. And I remember this perennial argument we would have constantly about house versus drum and bass. And there's this one New Year's Eve on Zanzibar when I had to fly off and do an FTV party in Chennai. I think it was 2005 or 2004. And D-Code stayed behind and played Zanzibar with you guys. And I think there was some, like, I think he was just like, look, I'm going to play 2 records. There was some conversation between you, Jitin, and him. He said, look, I'm just going to play 2 tunes. And then Jitin's like, you got to play. I said, no, you know what? I'll play 1 drum and bass tune. If they hate it, I'll stop. and then 2 hours later is bringing in New Year's Eve. To drum and bass. And I love that kind of the energy and that kind of, because I think, you know what it is, the whole idea of going away from Mambo number 5, like you said, and challenging the norms is the same. It's the same approach. You know what I mean? We're on the same team, but just coming at it from different angles. And I think that's what I kind of appreciate the most about it. It's why we're still friends and still work together on stuff.
You know what I realized much later on is that many different people played many different roles. And my role very clearly back then was sort of the guy that introduced dance music to people that weren't necessarily interested in dance music.
Mm-hmm.
So I would never shy away from playing the David Guetta record. I would never shy away from playing the Kylie Minogue remix.
Yeah.
Because very clearly, and what I was trying to do, and I did this successfully because of the MTV angle to it as well. I was the guy that would land up at venues across India, and people would come to see the MTV guy or hang out with the MTV guy, or the MTV guy was having a party and end up DJing records. And that's how I managed to introduce people to the music that I love.
Yeah.
And what I understood very early on was, if we took it too far too soon, then the guy who wasn't really interested in dance music would go, this is not quite for me, and I'm just going to go back to listening to whatever it is that I'm comfortable with, which is my, either Bollywood or pop music.
100%.
So I used to try and sort of corral the music that was being played around me into this sort of narrow spectrum to try and make sure that we catered to a very large common denominator.
And I think you've nailed it. Once you've got the audience in with something they're familiar with, you can go anywhere, right?
Yeah, but the thing was, I got so deep into that I didn't really see what else was happening around me. I mean, people like you and Arjun Vagle from Jalebi Cuddle started playing different sounds of music. It wasn't part of my scene, but I think that individually, all of us played different roles in creating the overall ecosystem. So whereas I was entry level, once people got past the entry level, there were so many other things that were happening that I may not have been a part of, or I may have facilitated in an inadvertent way that also took the scene that much further. And so it was lots of different pieces of the puzzle coming together.
You have a UK parallel in sort of the pantheon of British record labels and the progression of underground music in the UK. And Factory Records from Manchester that own the Hacienda, right? Yeah. So a quick breakdown. There was a big venue in Manchester, in London, in the UK, in, I want to say, the mid to late 80s. And it was responsible for bringing dance music to the UK. Like, the whole of club culture would not exist in the UK without the Hacienda. And it grew from kind of bands like Joy Division, which were more guitar based, into bringing DJs over and playing in front of audiences. It was the first time it ever happened. But the guy that built Hacienda and had a record label called Factory Records was a guy called Tony Wilson. And Tony Wilson was a TV presenter that used to present mainstream TV shows in the UK.
Really?
Yeah. And Tony Wilson used to go on TV and do sort of like local news spots and interesting sort of pieces and then feature bands. And from that job, from that mainstream TV job, grew the whole of underground music.
That's interesting, man. I've never heard of him.
Oh, mate, Tony Wilson's a legend. He's also a complete bastard, but he's a legend. And without his record label, you wouldn't have New Order, you wouldn't have the Happy Mondays, you wouldn't have that whole kind of crossover from indie music to dance, which is what I think that's probably why when I came to India and I saw what was happening with different proponents, like you said, Arjun Vagle, the pundits, you guys, in fact, the generation before you guys as well, obviously DJ Ivan and DJ Nasha and everyone that was taking Bollywood and turning it into something else and, trying to sort of move things forward on their own terms, felt like the UK to me in the 90s. Do you know what I mean? It felt like that excitement that something's happening. And the beauty of it is with India, that's never gone away. There's always something new happening. So in terms of your career, going from like Sunburn to then Supersonic after Submerge, it's been that same progression.
Yeah, except, by the way, have you heard the news? We've pulled the plug on Supersonic for next year.
I heard.
Had to do it, man.
It makes sense.
It didn't make... Nothing else made sense.
Dude, honestly, it's 3 months away. There's no way it can be done.
It's not just 3 months away. There's still no international air travel.
Yeah.
There's still no news on when there's going to be a viable vaccine available to people, it is still patently obvious that it is still dangerous to hang out in large groups of people singing and dancing. So I mean, there was no other option.
Yeah, no, I can see that totally. I think that all the attempts of doing stuff here in the UK, like I did one event in August that was COVID compliant, and it was like a venue, which is a venue really close to my house called Village Underground in London, and they've had some amazing gigs there. Like everyone's played there.
I've been there.
You must have been there.
I think that one night that we came and had a drink with you, and I went across to listen to I think there was some hard techno on at Village Underground. It's kind of like a semi-indoor, outdoorsy, huge warehousey space.
I mean, yeah. But it's not. It's mainly indoors. I think.
Yeah, mainly indoors. The smoking sections are. Yeah, okay.
Exactly. But it's a big venue, and everyone's played there. Like everyone's played there. But so they obviously, clubs in England are having a really hard time. There's no safety net for them. So I did a sort of COVID secure gig there, and their capacity went from 750 people to like 100 people, and it was like table service and all spaced out.
Yeah.
And it was a different vibe, but I think everyone was so grateful just to be somewhere and hear music at an amplified level. You know, it was great. But I think without actual sort of real secure protocols in place, a festival seems just not possible.
It's not. I mean, even there's an option now. We could have done a watered down version of Supersonic, which I thought would have been disastrous. Would have been terrible. The other is to actually make it financially viable. To be able to put together a show of a certain quality, you need to be able to have a certain number of people in there that makes the financial equation balance out. And there was just absolutely no way that you're going to make that happen. Like you can't put together a Supersonic event for 150 people or even 500 people and space them out, because the numbers will just not add up.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think that's the thing for anyone that's an aspiring DJ or festival promoter. That's the shit that gets really boring, but it's super important, is the spreadsheets and working out whether it can actually happen and be viable or not. And that's the trick.
It is. Let's not talk accounting. Not my favorite subject. But you had a Tito story to tell us.
Mate. So okay. So after, I don't know how this happened, but D and I were DJing at Tito's on a really good slot. You know, God bless Jitin, right? So Jitin used to look after us. He was also, I think he was he was really fundamental in the workings of MTV as well at the time. And he was managing us and looked after us. So bless him for going into bat for us. But we somehow got a set at Tito's at a really sort of high point. And as you pointed out, you've got to play stuff that the crowd knows before you can start taking them from the familiar to the more adventurous. So we're playing, and it turns out we smashed it. Like it was a really kind of Baga crowd. Like it was a really mainstream Baga crowd. And we took them like over an hour and a half to a really amazing drum and bass spectrum. It was like, how did we get here? And, you know, I love doing those kind of journeys from really commercial house all the way over there. And there was an old friend of mine from Birmingham, my hometown, that I hadn't seen for maybe like 10 years at that point. And in Tito's, there's a stage with dancers and there were like flames and stuff. And there was a big ladder that went up to the DJ console. And then it was a tiny, narrow DJ console. So D and I were on top of this console, kind of sandwiched together. And we couldn't jump around like we normally do because we'd fall the fuck off and kill ourselves. So we're like, okay, we have to be stationed. We've got very little room. Let's do our stuff here. So after, you know, during this set, we're killing it. And we're like, oh, dude, this is working. It's like, yeah, wicked. This is amazing. Amazing. This guy who was from my past pops up next to me, right? I don't know how the fuck he got from like the crowd in and up, but he did somehow. And he was like, Nerm. I was like, hey, how's it going, bro? Gave him a hug. I was like, cool. I'm just, you know, in the middle of DJing, like, concert. And this is pre-laptop. So obviously it's vinyl and needle skips and all of that kind of stuff. So he stood there and he tries to have a conversation mid-set, like an actual chat, like a catch-up. And he's like, so what you doing these days? And I'm like, bruv, is it not fucking obvious what I'm doing these days? Like, it's okay, could you just fuck off and then I'll come down and speak to you in a bit, you know? It was very, very, very surreal. And there's lots of other stories that I can't talk about here.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's Goa and it's late at night. There's definitely going to be other stories.
Yeah, like cows chasing deer around the beach and all those things, all of those things. But there's another
Why
point,
was the
right?
cow chasing?
Huh?
What did Dee do to the cow?
Oh, it's very, very difficult to describe. You know, it's very, very, very difficult to describe. He got out of a cab after driving in from Bombay, and literally a cow just went for him. It was bizarre. But listen, one thing I wanted to ask you as well. Okay, so you and I, when we played a gig for Smirnoff, I think, in Calcutta together. And
Yeah.
I ended up we were talking about you going to the gym, right? And you said to me that when you were younger, you were skinnier than I was.
Yeah.
But then you suddenly got jacked.
Well, the thing is, I was a bit smart alecky when I was in college. So I was 50 kilos or 51 kilos, and I was always kind of mouthing off to larger, beefier individuals, and I was getting smacked around a lot now. It got really annoying after a while getting smacked around. So I started going to the gym because I just didn't like getting smacked around anymore. All the time. and once I started training, I never got into fights after that. Nobody ever fought with me after I started building muscle.
That's fair enough. You know, I've been an excellent punch bag over the years too. So I think that's probably why we got along. Actually, sorry, I just saw there's lots of funny comments, but I want to say there's this. I keep seeing this one, which is like it's a fake accent. It's really not. I'm in London. This is my voice.
No, you do have a fake accent. It's a fake Japanese accent.
I'm not going to do anything racist on this, you prick. Stop trying to goad me into just doing something that people can capture and then put out there. That's ridiculous. No. But dude, actually, the other thing is that when you got all jacked, you became a VJ for everyone in England watching VJs, basically like video jockey, the same as DJ, because Nikhil was literally riding videos, as one would. Discs of, well, whatever.
Presenting. I mean, I never understood the video jockey part of it. I always used to say I'm a presenter.
Dude, that's it. When I became a presenter, okay, I was one pick when I was a bit of I became the UK correspondent for MTV India for like a period of about maybe 2 months or something. And when I go back to India on tour, they were like, oh, you're a VJ now. I was like, not really. I just sort of talk shit with my mates like we're doing right now. I thought it was quite inventive, the concept of VJ.
Yeah. I mean, the whole concept of MTV, you have to admit, was brilliant because they made money off playing other people's music videos. A bit like Airbnb.
I mean, they kind of still do.
Yeah. They don't make any of their own music. I mean, shows like Coke
But
Studio
then, brother, so do DJs. My whole life is basically playing other people's records.
Yes, but I don't know whether any DJ is large enough to be sort of financially traded on NASDAQ. I think MTV does.
I don't know, mate. I think there's another thing I wanted to ask you, right? Is that you came at this certain point in the 90s with your house music this love of house music, which was going up against Mambo No. 5, as we discussed.
But can we just talk about how house music's coming back again? You know, all its glory.
So I was gonna actually get there. I was gonna get there because it was the super club era, right? It was that super club era where house music was breaking through. There was ridiculous riders and stuff. And talking about being traded on NASDAQ is that you've got investment firms plowing money into super clubs back then. And you know what happened in between was that dubstep came along and kicked everyone's asses, and then suddenly EDM, right? And again, you were able to sort of flip from that, sort of get massaged by techno a little bit, and then come out of the EDM side again. And then now you're back, like you said, it's gone full circle back to house.
You lost me at massage.
Do you remember that minimal house period? The pre-EDM, the minimal house thing that was almost techno-y that then splintered off, and then, you know.
It was more, music that was sort of devised around ketamine. But yeah.
I mean, there you go. Yeah. Well,
didn't
actually,
quite work for me.
yeah, no, I think it was more. Maybe it was actually. But anyway, my point was you managed to ride all of those things all the way back.
I haven't, man. It's just the music scene seems to have found its way back into, not really disco. It's not 70s disco, because some of the house music, I mean, I'm talking specifically about the stuff that kind of music that Defected is putting out and Glitterbox is doing. And it seems to have found not just appeal with the people who were clubbing in the 90s, but also with the much younger generation as well.
Yeah.
It seems like music's back in a good place, and it's back to being inventive, and there's really good songs being written. There was a period where everything sounded like it was coming out of a cookie cutter.
Yeah.
And
but
not
I
anymore,
think,
which is great.
I think there's certain elements of it that still are. Like we could put together a typical EDM tune in about 5 minutes quite easily. We're using presets. Yeah. But having said the disco thing, like when Scream left dubstep to do house, he then swiftly went to disco. Seth Troxler, everyone's kind of, the disco theme was prevalent throughout. Now you mentioned it.
Yeah, but I think, well, if you look at techno as a subgenre in itself, it's a massive subgenre, because there's so many different styles of techno that you can now kind of call techno. It's like at one point in time, house was house, and then there was melodic house and vocal house and tribal house
and garage,
and there was electro house, which wasn't quite EDM, but it was a lot grimier and grungier. And then there was slow house, which is like faster hip hop. Yeah.
Or soulful, or vocal house.
Boston Bun. And a bit of Daft Punk. It's like there's French house, filter house, Italian house.
Oh, dude. Okay, so one of my favorite things of playing with you with Submerge was that kind of house crossover, or that kind of more Axwell kind of crossover-y kind of thing, or Eric Prydz kind of crossover stuff. And there's one guy who was able to make, those remixes I used to play that used to go from the house version to a D&B version. Yeah. They were all made by one guy. And that's High Contrast, who joined me last week or 2 weeks ago. High Contrast is an amazing drum and bass producer. All of his remixes are immense. All of them. Every single thing he does is just amazing. But the reason why I mention that is because he is a film buff. And he put me onto a film directed by... Wait, what's his name? Whoa, hold on. I'll find it. Brian De Palma, who did Scarface. Okay, Brian De Palma, like the director Brian De Palma, called Phantom of the Paradise. Okay, Phantom of the Paradise is a 1974 musical by Brian De Palma, which sounds odd as fuck. And in it, the character, it's based on Phantom of the Opera, but the characters in the music industry in the 70s, going from disco and making his own genre. But stylistically, this film influenced Daft Punk, Darth Vader, and the band Kiss. Wow, this story must have had some impact.
Daft Punk?
Okay, Daft Punk, Darth Vader, and the band Kiss. As in Kiss.
Yes. Ace Frehley and Gene Simmons and those guys.
So I'm going to say you should totally see this film. Now you mentioned Daft Punk, it sent my head on a whole other trajectory. But yeah, I think you'd really enjoy it.
Wow. Phantom of the
Paradise.
Because Phantom of the Opera is one of my all-time favorite musicals. I mean, I was obsessed with Andrew Lloyd Webber for a very long time. No way. Yeah. Like I would, you know how people listen to pop albums? I would listen to Cats and Phantom of the Opera. I went and watched Phantom of the Opera on Broadway, standing room, matinee show, because they had no tickets. The first time I went to New York. You're going to shit when you see this film, like shit in a good way. It's called Phantom of the Paradise. Brian De Palma, who's this esteemed director, did a 1974 musical. I've got to find this. Everybody who's watching right now, if you can figure out where I can get this movie from, please send me. Hang on, let me pull this image up and show you what I mean. And you're gonna love this. Check this out. I'll show you. Unplug this one so I don't spill my drink. And oops. What? Yeah. that a girl?
That's a dude. That's the Phantom of the Paradise. So you can see the Kiss, Darth Vader, and Daft Punk kind of thing. Also, look at his like his synths behind him.
That is crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm going to send that to you. So a lot of people are asking why you're wearing shades. Do you want to explain that? Or
Yes. We did this at the beginning of this live session. I have a thyroid condition that makes my eyes very puffy, which is why I wear shades all the time.
And it's not just because you're a gangster, you know.
No, I can actually show you my eyes. See, I look like it's a lot better now, but there was a time where the eyeball was like seriously puffed out. It makes the condition swells up the muscle behind the eyeball, and it pushes the eyeball forward.
It looks like you've been on like, this is it. You've been on a bender since you first joined MTV till just now. You literally haven't had sleep.
Before I started wearing glasses and I'd go out in public, people would be like, dude, are you on drugs? Or have you not slept? Are you drinking too much? I'm like, no. And I just got tired of telling people I have a thyroid condition. I'm like, fuck that.
Just wear the glasses
on.
Yeah,
fuck
exactly. Exactly. And you know what? That's it. And there's that whole tune, Sunglasses at Night.
Oh, I love it.
Which was
Tiga and Zephyrus.
Yes. And also, there was a time when we took Skrillex to India. So it was me, Pavan, Prash, and Ali as Arms House. We brought Skrillex to India.
Just first time Skrill came down with you guys. Like, I mean, the afters, man.
That's what I was on about.
More than the shows. I mean, I know that whoever came out of the Skrillex shows, I know you loved it. We loved the shows. It was visually fantastic. The music was great. Skrill on stage was an animal. Pavan on the mic was brilliant. But the afters
was something, and I couldn't. I think I was so like it took so much to make it happen that I was like, I'm gonna do one afters, and I played the afters at Kitty Sue.
Yeah,
and I think no, it's the Major Lazer tour. I was not about the Major Lazer. Okay, so we took Major Lazer out first, and then Skrillex, right? So it was the Major Lazer tour, and you were wearing a T-shirt saying "Bigger Than Prince."
Oh yeah,
and I made you take it off and give it to me.
Oh yes, and I actually so I wrote to Yusuf and I asked him to send me another one. And you know what T-shirt you were wearing? I remember that as well because
the Wolves T-shirt.
Yeah.
But despite the fact that you're twice my size and you put this on and it was like a crop top on you. You were wearing it was just like it was ridiculous.
I still have the Wolves T-shirt. Cool.
Amazing. That's all. I don't have the Bigger Than Prince T-shirt.
Well, I still have the Bigger Than Prince T-shirt because I wrote to Yusuf and said, I love that T-shirt. I was really drunk and I gave it away to a friend of mine. Can you please send me another one?
Can you get me a small one of those, please?
It's easier for you to get a hold of it because Yusuf is in, where's Circus based out of?
Circus Records.
Yeah.
It's on Circus.
So Yusuf has, I think it's called Wasted Heroes is the name of the T-shirt company.
Right.
Hang
on,
saying
Circus Records. No way.
It's not on Circus Records, but I think Wasted Heroes T-shirts. Google that.
Huh. Okay, yeah, it's easier for me to get it. You're right.
Yeah. So
you're totally right. I didn't know where that T-shirt, because I put it on and I was like, give me that shirt. And then I put it on and it was like the size of, I looked like a coat hanger.
But it's a great quality T-shirt. I still have it. Send me
awesome.
that. Send me a font called Believe in Love, and I love the font. It's just really, really simple.
Nice and blocky.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. God, we've done so much work together over the years. I was thinking about like that Sunburn, the Smirnoff Experience stuff, Supersonic, all of these things. Do you ever do any parties that don't begin with S?
Submerge was also S.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Satellite is also S.
What's Satellite?
Man. The names just kind of pop into my head, and they all tended to be with S.
That was it.
I don't know why. I mean, there are stories behind all of the names.
So go on.
Well, they're not complicated stories. You know, there was a club called Rock Bottom in India, in Mumbai.
Yes.
And
obviously.
3 of my really close friends were managing the music policy and they were running the club. And I asked them if I could have a night because, we were talking about doing our own nights and throwing our own parties. So a friend of mine said, he finally called and said, okay, so we're not doing anything on Thursdays. Would you like to do a Thursday night? I'm like, yeah, sure. And we met that evening for a walk on Carter Road. And he was working with, remember Grandmother India? They did some
Yeah, of course.
amazing digital visual stuff.
Of course.
So Grandmother
They're
had
just
found
those
this.
guys.
Sorry?
They're just those guys.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So they had a visual for, they wanted to use it for a flyer for Rock Bottom. It was an image of a tiny iceberg floating on the surface, but it was like a section where you could see the bottom of the iceberg as well. It was gigantic. And I looked at that image when Gaurav showed me the image. I said, "Oh, we just got this image. We're going to make a flyer of it." I said, "Give that to me, and I'll use it for our night." He said, "Yeah, sure." And while we were walking, I looked at it and I said, "And we'll call the night Submerge." It just kind of
Fair enough. Okay.
It just popped up, and it kind of, and then
Nice.
later on, of course, people said, "Oh, it's a very negative name, and we should give it a little more uplifting thing." And I said, "Well, it's too late by then." So that's how Submerge happened.
Great. Like, because like it's subversive. It's a bit dark, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, but it wasn't intended to be. It just came out of looking at that image and when submerged the underground sound. It was underwater.
What's the opposite to sub? Supermerge. That sounds rubbish. But then, of course, you did supersonic. So I mean, then
Supersonic. So Supersonic happened. A really good friend of mine, Dhruv, sent me a message on my birthday, but 5 years before Supersonic happened. And he said, the message was very simply, back then was SMS, "Happy birthday, Chin-Ups, go Supersonic."
and that
it
became
just
the
stuck.
slogan.
That message just stuck with me. So when we were talking about doing a name for this festival, I kind of went, "What about Supersonic?" And we were like, "Yeah, we really like that." I said, "I'm not sure." Actually, that wasn't my first. I wasn't settled in on Supersonic.
Yeah.
And I was like, "No, let's think of some of the names." And then, of course, they discussed it internally. And then Viacom said everybody in the building likes it, and it became Supersonic. So my friend Dhruv is credited with Dhruv Pandey is Juhi Pandey's.
Oh, Dhruv, that Dhruv.
That Dhruv.
No way.
Yes.
Fuck.
So he was the one that gave us the idea for the name Supersonic.
No way.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I never knew that. I just knew Dhruv as like Juhi's little brother.
Yeah, so he was the one that sent me the message, and Sunburn is actually, of course, Sherender has tried to credit himself with everything Sunburn, which is bizarre. But
Do you know about the sort of side project that we did based around that?
No.
Oh, okay. I'll tell you after you told the story.
Okay. So the name for initially when I got in touch with Percept to do this music festival, they had registered a very interesting name. They had registered a name. It's actually still there in the registrar of companies. If you search for it, you'll find it. And it's registered to Percept Denmark, which is what they were called back then. The India International Dance Festival, IIDF, was what they wanted to call a music festival. And when
That's a conference name.
Me,
That's a conference name. That's not a festival name.
I said it sounds like a Bharatanatyam conference. Those are my exact words. And they're like, "Oh, so what should we call it?" I said, "Give me some time, I'll come back." Where should we? They had no idea. So I suggested Goa because we'd been doing the Zanzibar parties in Goa. I knew that the time period between Christmas and New Year's was fantastic. Hermit's partner in his fashion styling business, her friend, owned the land in Goa that we did the festival on.
No way.
And then Tito's, David, was the one that helped us with all the permissions the first year in Goa. So it was all of my friends and family that got together. And the name Sunburn happened because I was kind of looking for music on Beatport. Armin had just released an album. And I was looking through Armin Van Buren?
Not Van Helen.
No, not Van Helden. So I was looking through Armin's discography. And years ago, he'd released a song called Sunburn.
No.
Fuck. And I looked at that and went, "That's an interesting name."
Huh.
And that name stuck. And then after that, I put out a message in the message boards and said, "Hey, we're planning on doing a music festival." And we'd already decided the name by then, right? So we're planning on doing a music festival, come up with some names. And one of the guys in the forum actually suggested Sunburn as well. So that's how the name happened.
And is there any beef with that gentleman in the forum that put Sunburn? Saying that was my name. Bastard. Stole it from me.
No. That community, that Submerge online community was so fucking awesome. I can't even begin to spell the ways. Because there was never any feeling of mine or I. It was all us. It was all driven towards making the world a better place with dance music.
I honestly, like I said, I think that it was, you are 100% correct about how lovely and receptive everyone was. So I think when me and Dee played Bangalore, and I forget what club you had there, I think it was one of the very first gigs we did in Bangalore after the curfew sort of thing kicked in. And I only discovered this years later that there was a forum. I got a Google alert or something happened where I discovered the old forum, and I was like, oh my God, I remember this gig. And we ended playing Smack My Bitch Up as kind of like a punk kind of fuck you, like outro kind of thing. And it was a lot of fun in a loving way. And everyone was so positive. They started off being a little bit cautious about drum and bass and stuff. And by the end, they were just like, this is awesome. So you're right. It was very non-toxic.
Yeah, it was superbly inclusive. And the really good thing about Bangalore audiences back then, and I think to a large part even now, is that they never kind of walked into the club with any preconceived notions. They walked in and they said, okay, we've never heard of these people. We'll give them a listen. If we like it, we'll just embrace it. If we don't like it, we don't like it. Yeah. It wasn't like, oh, I only like Martin Garrix. So, if you're not going to play Martin Garrix music, then you're not a good
I'm sorry, Martin Garrix wasn't born then. This was a whole different era.
Yes, that's a different story. But I'm just using the name to elucidate my point.
Sure. God, who was big then? God, it was pre-Getter as well.
It was it was Axwell was big because he was one of the first guys that I brought in.
I want to say it was pre-Axwell too.
It was pre-Axwell's big kind of thing.
I think it was Van Dyke days. It was those days. It was like Smirnoff experience days.
It was Van Dyke, Sasha,
Digweed, yeah.
Danny Tenaglia.
Oh yeah.
Paul Cox, that generation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what? It was just, it was so nice to see that happen in India as well. And that excitement progress. And I'm glad that you're still at the forefront of it and pushing it along, especially then also incorporating all these other underground scenes and making them part of it. That's just great. I think the last Supersonic that I went to.
To be fair, we've got a much bigger team now, Nerm. So it's not just me that plans these things together. There's Ishan, as you know, Chippy.
Yeah, of
and
course.
There's Noel, and there's Ashish and Gaurav, and there's a whole bunch of people that come together with ideas because.
And there's input from the whole scene.
Head's more into electronic music, and then we need a much larger team of people to put together all the different sounds.
So that was it. There's a whole. I mean, that's the thing is that you and I both know we've both had the privilege of witnessing this from the very start in India to where it is now.
Yeah.
From going from when there weren't any venues to venues, let alone a festival. It was just like, it's crazy, this whole trajectory. But the interesting thing that I've noticed is that there's a lot of Indian production and Indian underground music coming out that's made by young upcoming producers in the alternative world, right? I hear music non-stop from young producers in India that happen to be like electronica, techno, drum and bass, like footwork, Miami bass, like all these different subgenres. Do you have the same sort of thing in the world that you really love or represent? Like, are you hearing like EDM from young, new Indian acts?
I was never particularly into EDM.
Okay, so accessible house music, let's say.
Not even. So when I'm programming a festival, the music that I listen to, in fact, if you check out my Spotify playlist, easy listening, there's not a single electronic track on it.
That's because you're fucking 40. There's a difference. What about new people, bastard?
Yeah, well, there's some truth to that. But when I'm trying to program a festival, it's not about my music taste. It's about trying to create a body of music over 3 days that delivers what fans buy tickets for, which is hey, there's something in there that I want to come and watch. And second is exposes people to music that they may not have heard of and may not have discovered otherwise, but they will fall in love with.
Totally. Yeah.
Third is to try and make the festival future-proof. To say, I think this is going to be big in 3 years' time, so we're going to start introducing it to people now, so that when it comes around, we've already got a core fan base of Supersonic fans or music fans that are into the sound that will then propel it further.
Totally.
So these are three things that I'm trying to do at a festival, because there's loads of artists that I would love to personally book if I was just doing a party for myself, but I don't, because it doesn't make sense.
So who from India's got your ears then? Like, name 3 acts from India right now that are new that have got your ears.
There's a girl from Chennai called Mali, who I think is really, really cool. Nothing Anonymous.
Yeah.
And I would say, man, there's so much stuff happening in the electronic space. You've got Oxygen.
Yeah, obviously. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's difficult to kind of pinpoint because this year's been a shit year for everyone. But Browncoat, Navid Khan, has had a brilliant year. He's released on some of the biggest techno labels this year, and the kind of music that he's producing has blown me away because I've never known.
His artist name is Brown Coat.
Browncoat.
Okay.
Navid, you know Navid?
Yeah, of course I know Nawid. That's why
Nawid
I didn't know his artist name. That's why I'm asking.
His artist name is Browncoat, that he's been producing music, techno music under for the past 3 or 4 years.
Sick.
But this year he's got about 4 or 5 releases out on. He's released on Yotto's label. He's released on Stereo. He's released on Click Records.
Sick.
And he's had a brilliant year.
Got him. Wicked. Oh, I'm gonna get all of his stuff.
And then there's Manny as well from Chennai who released on Submerge. He put an album out called 1111, which is what today is.
Okay. Ah, there you go.
There you go. Skip's been doing some great work. There's a hip hop artist from Bangalore called Hanuman Kind that I've heard. That's brilliant. The Indian hip hop scene has also done like some pretty stellar work, and not just in Hindi and not just in English. In a lot of vernacular languages as well, which has been like staggeringly good.
See, the whole regional language, like you were talking earlier about MTV's reach into the heartlands and into the regions. That's exactly the same as Indian hip hop right now. It's going right into the heartlands, right?
Yeah, you're right. So I'm just trying to read a message from someone who said, "No, we need to ask about Fever 333 at the last Supersonic and how they almost destroyed the stage." Mickey 2 wants to know. Did you watch Fever 333?
Dude, I ended up presenting after that dude on the VH1 Supersonic at Home thing, where I did that whole set after him, but I didn't see the set.
I almost stopped the music because I didn't know this was part of the show. The guy climbed the scaffolding on the side.
Wait, which year was this?
Last year. This year.
It's the 1 year I missed because I had surgery, so I couldn't actually fly anywhere or do anything.
Oh yeah, you didn't come in this year.
Yeah, because I had my leg surgery, so it was the one Supersonic that I couldn't get to.
Fever 333, easily the best fucking set of the festival this year. I mean, the guys who caught it will know what I'm talking about. And it's one of those sets that I was standing in the wings and I was watching it with my jaw kind of over here.
Yeah.
And there were headliners on every stage, and I'm like, shit. People need to see this act. This is one of those acts that you book that you want people to experience, and it's one of those acts that you know that if they experience it, it's going to blow them away. And the guitarist climbed up the scaffolding.
Wait. I just want to big up Stretch, who's just popped up before I forget. Big up Stretch.
Hey,
MC Stretch.
what's up, Stretch?
MC of Supersonic, essentially, is amazing. Yeah, but please continue. Sorry, bro.
So the guitarist was up the scaffolding, and I didn't know that they had rehearsals and this was part of the act because he went up with his guitar, climbed the bloody scaffolding on the side, and this is India, right? We've got some of the best technicians working there, but you never know when one guy's hasn't connected a wire properly and there's a naked wire fucking touching a metal bit. And I'm looking at this guy up there, and he's holding onto the scaffolding with one hand, playing the guitar, and I'm standing in the wings going, do I pull the plug on the music? Or not? Because I haven't watched rehearsal.
Yeah.
I didn't know this was part of the show. And of course, everything goes off really well, but my heart was in my mouth for about 45 seconds.
And that's, you know what, it reminds me of, so that was obviously arranged, obviously planned. They knew that was going to happen. But have you seen, like, you know, Pavan from Foreign Beggars? Obviously, you know Pavan from Foreign Beggars. Yeah. But he's done some stage dives from ridiculously rickety heights. Like, they're just ridiculous. And he's climbed scaffolding at Glastonbury and jumped off into crowds, unplanned. And I'm just like, bruv, like, that's those moments when you're like, you're going to mash yourself up. Yeah.
I did that once when I was drunk. It was the closing party of Submerge at Fuga. They were shutting Fuga down, and I said, let's not go out quietly, let's go out to the bank, right? So got hammered, plastered, and Pearl's playing, right? So she's on the decks. And remember Fuga? They had the deck a little bit higher. And
so Fuga's the place that I'm talking about, actually. Now you've reminded me. That was the venue that D and I played. So yeah. So
that's where all the Submerge punters would come and hang out as well. Yeah. So on the closing night, I've got up on the console in front of Pearl, and Pearl's like, don't do it. And I've made an announcement on the mic, look back at the crowd, and I've handed the microphone off to Pearl. She's still playing, saying, don't do it, on vinyl. And I've just fallen over backwards like that into the crowd. And they've taken me around the dance floor, pop me back up on the console, at which point in time I realized that somebody stole my fucking phone.
But dude, that's not a stage dive. That's like a stage flop. That's just like,
That's
okay,
a
I'll
stage
just
flop.
fall back.
It's a stage
Come on,
flop. I flopped over backwards. But
yes,
it was,
exactly.
It was high enough to get hurt if they didn't catch you.
I mean, yeah. I mean, to be fair, in various states of inebriation, you could trip up and you could get hurt quite easily as well, let alone flopping off a stage. But there's one other story, was, again, you've just reminded me, because you mentioned about Pearl being the voice of reason and then exuberance, was that Dee and I were playing at Zenzi in Bombay back in 2004, I guess. And it was those days.
Zenzi is one of those spaces. It was one of those, it almost felt like a safe space for music fans, artists, crazy people. Really missed that space.
Dude, Zenzi in Bandra was the equivalent to London's Blue Note. So there's a club in London called the Blue Note where essentially all of underground music happened. Drum and bass, Asian underground. Giles Peterson's night was there. In fact, he was a co-owner of the venue. But anything that wasn't commercial was at the Blue Note. And it was, broken beat, or anything that wasn't commercial or wasn't sort of house was at the Blue Note. And it was just anything broken or disparate or weird was there. And Zenzi, for me, was like the equivalent of that in Bandra. It was just anything weird went, and it was great. Yeah. And the thing is, you mentioned like Pearl was DJing on vinyl. And I remember just like every single point of contact, from your record to your needle, to the tone arm, to the deck itself, to the mixer, to the amplifier, there's a possibility of something fucking up in that chain at every point. Like at every point, technically, it was, you had to be a mini engineer. But also in India at that time, needles were hard to come by. So like venues, DJ needles would, the needles for the turntables would often just go missing. They were a shit show, So as a sort of Western DJ, you'd put on your rider, your technical rider, you want needles, but venues hardly ever had them. So I remember Dee and I were playing this gig at Zenzi. We're like, Nikhil, we've got no needles, man. We've got to come to you. So we came up to your place up this hill in Bandra. And Pearl was like, are you guys okay? And me was like, yeah, we're fine. We just need these needles, man. Get the needles. And you're like, okay, boys, but just return these properly. It's like, yeah, it's fine. So we get in this rickshaw. We go rocketing down the hill. Hey, Dee's on the chat. Hey, Dee, how's it going? Talking about you, bruv. And we went rocketing down the hill, uphill road, skidded round the corner to Waterfield Road. And Dee and I are just like, enthused and like judging each other. Like, yeah, man, it's going to be wicked. We've got the needles. And suddenly we hit this pothole. And it's like a fucking film. Everything goes into slow motion. We hit this pothole. The rickshaw goes flying up in the air, right? And we both just grab onto it. We're screaming in slow-mo. It's like, ah! You can see this wheel flying off. The front wheel of the rickshaw flies off. And we land. And there's fucking sparks flying off the front of the rickshaw, right? And Dee and I just go, fuck! Right? We just go, fuck! And this thing just goes, skids to a halt. We look at each other and go, we've got 10 minutes to our set. We grab the records and just fucking...
I've never heard this story.
Yeah. Yeah. We nearly fucking died on the way to this gig with your needles, but we got them back to you. So yeah. True story. 100% true story.
Hey, Dee. How's it going? I haven't seen him in ages, man.
Yeah, man.
Ages and ages. How's this project? The band, how's the band doing? We heard a couple of songs.
The band thing came and went. Now it's like him and his brother doing Decode and Silence.
Okay.
Which is amazing. So they've had a release on Ram Records. They've had like a bunch of releases on Maya Jane Coles' management's associated labels. It's wicked. I'll send you some stuff. Yeah.
Rumote is here as well. Hey, Rumotes.
Hi, Ruhi. Hi, Ruhi. Listen, bro, I need to wee. Do you want to continue talking, or do you want to go to sleep now, seeing as you've got a whole family at home?
I'm going to go bounce, man.
You're going to go ahead? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's sleepy times for you guys. It's also really late in India, right? So
it's 20 to 1, and I'm going to wake up pretty early in the morning tomorrow. We have a 2.5-year-old at home, so schedules change.
Thank you for joining me at 6 p.m. onwards in the UK. I appreciate that.
Lovely chatting with you as well, man. You take it easy.
And thank you all for joining us. I appreciate all the lovely people popping up. Mwah.
Yes, and everybody from the Roadies family who's been watching and is slightly confused about what's going on, don't panic. We shall return you to normal programming later on this week when we go back to talking about Roadies and all the fights that are happening.
This has been the British Twilight Zone. Yes.
Yeah. Take it easy, man. See you.
Big love. Mwah. See you soon, bro.
Bye.
Bye.